Topic 3.3, multiplying fractions. Let's begin by reviewing how to read an area model. What you should notice when you look at this rectangle is that it's divided into 3 horizontal rows. Okay, and out of those 3 horizontal rows, 2 of them have been shaded in. So that gives us our first fraction. 2 rows shaded in out of a total of 3 rows. Now, have a look at the vertical columns. There are 8 of them in total, and 3 of them have been shaded in. So our next fraction is going to be 3 out of 8. And of course, we're multiplying. Now, when we multiply fractions using an area model, we determine the product by counting the number of units that have been shaded twice. In this case, that's 6. And 6 will become the numerator of the product. And the denominator can be found by simply multiplying the base of the rectangle by the height. That's how you calculate the area of a rectangle. So base times height, in this case, is 24. So 6 out of 24. And of course, we should always simplify. So the numbers 6 and 24 have a common factor of 6. We can divide each of these by 6. So in order to simplify this, we could divide 6 by 6, which is equal to 1. We can divide 24 by 6, which is equal to 4. And this is our simplified product. Now, what you might have already noticed is that you can simply multiply the numerators together and the denominators together straight across to get your product. So you can multiply 2 times 3 to get 6, and you can multiply 3 times 8 to get 24. So you'd have to just multiply straight across, and then of course we want to simplify to get our 1/4. Now, there is another way you can do this. You can actually simplify before you multiply. And that involves using the common factors of the numbers within the fractions. So, for example, if we know that 2 times 3 will give us 6, which is the answer of the numerator, we could rewrite this equation as 2 times 3 over 3 times 8. With these two values above and below the fraction bar grouped together. And then we can look for common factors. So for example, the number 2 and the number 8 have a common factor of 2. So we can actually divide these two numbers by 2 and simplify them before we even multiply. So this, for example, can become 1 by dividing by 2. The 8 can become 4 by dividing by 2. And then we can look at the two remaining numbers here. They are both 3, so their common factor would be 3 that we can use. We can divide 3 by 3 to get 1. Divide the 3 down here by 3 to get 1. And then we can multiply. So 1 times 1 over 1 times 4. And you'll find when we solve this, it's already simplified. So 1 over 4. So in this strategy, you're multiplying first, then simplifying. And in this strategy, you simplify first using common factors, and then multiply. Let's try a few more examples. How about 2/15 times 3/8? Well, if you look closely at these numbers, you notice that the opposite numbers actually have common factors. Okay, so for example, the 2 and the 8, they have a common factor of 2. The 15 and the 3, they have a common factor of 3. So we can actually simplify, in this case, before we multiply. So that's the method I'm going to show you. We can cross this number out and put 1 by dividing it by 2. Do the same thing over here, divide it by 2, and we'll get 4. And the 15 and the 3 can both be divided by 3. So let's divide the 3 by 3 to get 1, and divide the 15 by 3 to get 5. Then we can rewrite this equation as 1 times 1 over 5 times 4. and this is going to equal 1 over 20. How about the next question? 4 over 7 times 2 over 5. We can quickly check the opposite numbers, see if we have any common factors. And it looks like we don't. All right? In fact, these two numbers actually have a common factor of 1, but that doesn't actually help us simplify them any further. Looks like they're already simplified. Same goes for the 7 and the 2, right? So we can simply just multiply in this case. 4 times 2 is equal to 8, and 7 times 5 is equal to 35. And this product is already simplified. Now, how about 7/3 times 9/14? In this case, there are some common factors. The number 7 is a common factor of both 7 and 14, and the number 3 is a common factor of the number 3 and 9. So in this case, we could simplify before we multiplied. So let's do that. Let's divide the number 7 by 7. We'll make it 1. Divide 14 by 7 to make it 2. We'll divide these two numbers by 3 each to make them 3 and 1. Then we'll rewrite the expression as 1 times 3 over 1 times 2, which is equal to 3 over 2. Okay, now 3 over 2 is an improper fraction. That is, the numerator is larger than the denominator. So we could also express this as a mixed number, which would be 1.5. It's always good practice to estimate the product to see if your answer is a reasonable answer. It can help you avoid silly mistakes. So for example, you might look at the first question, which was 2/15 times 3/8. Both of those fractions, if you consider their values, are actually closer to 0 than any other whole number. They're closer to 0 than 1, for example. And for that reason, we know that the answer should be close to 0, because if we were to estimate each of these, the equation would be 0 times 0. And 0 times 0, of course, as we know, is 0. So this answer of 1/20 makes a whole lot of sense. 1/20 is very close to 0. If you can imagine drawing out a number line, dividing 1 unit into 20 different notches, and then taking a step to 1/20, the length of 1 unit, it's very, very close to 0. So that makes a whole lot of sense. We can do the same with these two examples too. 4/7, this is a little bit more than half, so it's actually a little closer to 1 than 0, and this would be a little bit closer to 0. So 1 times 0 would be my estimates, and that means that the product should be close to 0. And here's my product, it's 8/35, and that is very close to 0. Again, much closer to 0 than 1. And in this case, 7/3 over 9/14. In this case, 7/3 is actually more than 1. In fact, it's more than 2. It would be 2 and a third as a mixed number. So we can round that to 2, let's say. Our estimate for the first fraction here could be 2. And then 9/14 is a little bit closer to 1 than 0. It's a little bit more than half. So we can estimate that as 1. And 2 times 1 would be 2. And our answer of 3/2, or 1.5, is fairly close to 2. In fact, 1.5 would round up to 2 rather than down to 1.